Happy Thursday, Papillion La Vista Community Schools. This is Andy Rickley, your superintendent. Thank you so much for joining us for another Facebook Live event. Before we talk about the format and go through the PowerPoint, I'd like to make a few introductions of administrators that are joining us this evening. To my left, we have Shireen Siri, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. And to Shireen's left, we have Dr. Katie Settles, who is our Assistant Superintendent for HR. Joining us with the broadcast this evening, we have Lucas Bingham, who's our Director of Technology, Annette Iman, who's our Director of Communications, Dr. Tammy Voisin, who's our Director of Special Education, Dr. Trent Steele, who's our Head of Student Services, and Victoria Osterly, who is our ace behind the camera. So again, thanks for all for joining us this evening. This Facebook Live event will be about 60 minutes. We like to start on time and end on time, but we also want to take an opportunity to answer any questions that you may have. In terms of the format for the evening, we have a number of PowerPoint slides that we're going to walk you through. Most of the information presented tonight will deal with our teaching and learning initiatives. We'll also be talking a little bit about end-of-the-year ceremonies such as commencement. We'll talk a little bit about honors night. But again, we want the bulk of tonight's activities to center around the question and answer so that you can walk away feeling like your questions have been answered. Whether this is your first Facebook Live event or if you've joined the district a number of times, we'll try to keep this very informal. As you're probably aware, we've done a number of these events over the last month. In fact, about a month ago, we did a Facebook Live on internet safety. We did a COVID-19 update approximately 3 weeks ago, and we'll continue to do Facebook Live updates as long as we have good viewership. And the last I checked, I heard we had about 200 viewers, and my guess is we'll pick up a few more along the way. If you weren't able to join us live, we'll continue to have this on our Facebook website so that you can continue to look at the video and see how questions have been answered in real time. So without further ado, I would like to start with the agenda. And as we start with the agenda, I'd like to share just a brief personal story. I know many of you out there are really struggling with all of the news, with work, perhaps with family issues, and perhaps above all with the teaching and learning that we're asking parents to support at home. I can tell you that my lovely wife, Amy, who's blessed to stay at home for her work, has been doing virtually all of the teaching and learning in the Rickley house, and we have 3 school-age children. I've got a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary-age student, and I can tell you there have been days that have been an absolute struggle in the Rickley house. Some days our kids wake up and they're motivated, and I feel like we've really gotten a lot done, and then there's other days where, I'll be honest, there's just not a ton of learning that's occurred. So the reason why I share that is if the head learner in the school district and his wife are having struggles and experiencing challenges, then give yourself some grace. All of us are new to this. We're all figuring this out as we go along, and with each passing day, hopefully it gets a little bit better and we learn a little bit more. So please be willing to give yourself a little bit of a credit with all this. So our agenda this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about the big picture state of affairs within the school district. We want to give you an update on a program that we're particularly proud of, our feeding program at Golden Hills and at La Vista Middle School. But the bulk of the presentation will center around teaching and learning, and Ms. Siri will be leading us through that portion of the PowerPoint. And then again, we'll take some questions from you. So moving into the big picture. As always, your students' health and your family's health is our #1 priority, and hopefully every single decision that we've made going back to spring break really underscores this point. We are a teaching and learning organization. We are committed to moving your child or your children academically, but we can't lose sight of the human element in all of this, and we know that there are many families in crisis, whether it's financial, whether it be emotional. We know based on statistics from around the country, all around the planet really, that domestic violence is on the upswing. So we know that there are many things pulling you in many different directions, and we're trying to be mindful of that. But safety will continue to be our #1 concern. This second bullet point is maybe the most important point of the entire presentation, and that is we need to find balance for all of you, for our teachers, for our families, and most of all for our students. I want to tell you about two emails I've gotten in the last 48 hours. I had one parent contact me, and she was very polite, but I could tell she was pretty frustrated with the district, and she was specifically frustrated about senior, about college credits, about getting that student ready for the next step, and I think when she was looking around the metro and the state and the country, she was thinking that perhaps some of our efforts were a little bit lax in terms of the teaching and learning. So that was one parent perspective. Not more than 45 minutes ago, I received a very different email from a parent who was an educator herself, interestingly enough. And this parent was telling me about the extreme struggles that this individual and her spouse were having staying on top of the teaching and learning with their children at home, and that it was just overwhelming, something that I suspect many of us are probably feeling right now. So those are the two extremes we're dealing with. You're not pushing my child enough, and then we're hearing from other parents saying you are giving us too much to reasonably be expected to do. So what we're trying to do is find balance, and again, not losing touch of the human element that is so critical for all of our families. You all know that the school district is closed up. This is not new information. Governor Ricketts made this announcement through a directed health measure over a week ago. This closure does include all school facilities, playgrounds, tracks, obviously fields such as Foundation Field. So please help us monitor that. And as a parent, please don't send your children to our elementary buildings, for example, to our playgrounds. We just want to make sure your kids are safe and that we're observing proper social distancing. In terms of communication, this is consistent with what we shared a couple of weeks ago, but we're continuing to have ongoing conversations with our governor. For my part, I think Governor Ricketts has been a very strong leader, and his communication with school superintendents, in my experience, has been outstanding. We're also meeting with our Commissioner of Education, Dr. Matt Bloomstead. We're also meeting with Department of Health officials as well as other superintendents from across the metro and across the state. Why? Because we want to have the very best information for you, for your family, and for your students. But above all, please make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're taking care of your family. Our food program. We're in week 3 of our food program. Incredibly proud of the district stepping in and really doing some wonderful things for some of our most vulnerable families. If you weren't aware, we have 2 pickup points, one at La Vista Middle School, the other at Golden Hills Elementary. Once a week, starting at 7:30 in the morning, every Monday, we are handing out meals for the week. The very first week was a little bit of an up and down encounter. I don't think we anticipated the crowds that we would have, which speaks to the need in the community. I believe each subsequent week has gotten a little bit smoother, and we are serving approximately 2,200 meals a week. I just have to tell you, we've had so many individuals step up, from teachers who've said, "Let me help," to paraeducators who've come in and helped prepare the meals. We've had community volunteers reach out and say, "I want to be part of this program." But it is absolutely incredible what our food program is doing for some of our neediest families. I also have to tell you, this is not the only example of community members and district staff stepping up. Just this week, we had a paraeducator from one of our buildings reach out to HR and say, "I've got some sewing skills, and I think I can help make masks for district personnel that are still on duty." And that's exactly what she did. Another conversation we had with CHI Health, one of their executives had reached out to me and said, "Andy, we're reaching a critical point with our antibacterial gel, our sanitizing wipes, and most of all, safety goggles." And I put out a call across the district to our principals. They responded with over 700 safety goggles and enough antibacterial wipes and gel to wipe down a small hospital. So I share that just so you know what incredible people we have in the community stepping up and what incredible staff we have. We know graduation's on the forefront of staff's minds, student minds, and most of all, family minds. And we feel like we have a really good plan. In fact, we met with Principal Kalina and Principal Johnson just this afternoon. On Sunday, May 10th, and that is Mother's Day, that is the original date set aside for graduation, Monarch will have a virtual graduation at 1 o'clock. Papillion La Vista South will have their graduation at 5 o'clock. We don't have all the details yet announced, but we want this to be a really classy, meaningful event for our students. We'll talk a little bit more about details as we start to finalize that, but we want to highlight our students. We want to showcase the musical talents of our students, for example. We want every single student to be singled out just like they were walking across the stage at Baxter Arena. So please put that on your calendar, 1 o'clock for Monarch, 5 o'clock for Titan, Sunday, May 10th. It's going to be a really special day. We also know, however, that a live event is equally important, that it's a family event, it's a community event in so many different ways. To that end, we have secured a date at Baxter Arena on July 10th, which is a Friday, 3:30 for Monarch, 7:30 for Titan. One thing that we're watching very closely, though, is our governor has given us some preliminary guidance that he may say live face-to-face graduations would be best served after August 1. That's not official yet, so we'll continue to monitor. So what I would ask all of our parents and staff and students to do is put a tentative hold on July 10th, and then we are looking at some early dates in early August, also at Baxter Arena. More details to follow. Lastly, we are committed to an honors night at Monarch and an honors night at Titan. These are very important nights for our families and our students and staff. We're going to be doing that via video presentation, but again, we want to highlight the wonderful accomplishments of our students, particularly our seniors, before they leave us this spring. The last slide that I have before I turn it over to Ms. Siri has to do with our teaching and learning process. Lots of information on here that Shireen will get into in far greater detail, but I would like to draw your attention to the very last bullet point. We want you to take care of your family and your students first and foremost. We are a teaching and learning organization, as I said at the beginning, so of course we're always going to be thinking and focusing on teaching and learning. But there is nothing, I repeat, nothing that your students will miss over these next several weeks that can't be retaught or relearned or reinforced when we get them back next fall. Our teachers are absolute masters at meeting students where they are. Every single year, every kid that walks into Papillion Vista Community Schools comes in with areas of strength and areas that they need reinforcement in. And our teachers meet those needs every single day. This is a little bit different given that our students are going to miss a full quarter of face-to-face instruction, but I am extremely confident in the qualities of our staff and the ability of our teachers to meet your students where they are. So please don't get terribly hung up if you don't feel like you're doing an adequate job getting your kids ready. I know this is a high-stakes thing, particularly for our seniors, but don't forget the human element. That's the piece that we can't ever overlook as school leaders, as parents, as families, as community members. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shireen Siri for a little bit more detail on our teaching and learning plan.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rickley. Good evening, families of Papillion La Vista Community Schools. Tonight, I'm going to share with you the next phase, the final phase of our teaching and learning plan, and kind of give you an update by each level, as well as in the conversation with some details on grading. So as Dr. Rickley pointed out, we are looking to start the last part of our teaching and learning phase on April 13th. If you recall, we had continued learning and instruction with our seniors in order to keep them on track for graduation. We are now getting ready to roll out new exposure to learning concepts for our students in grades preschool clear up through 11th grade. This will be a continuation of learning, and we have spent the last few weeks working with our teachers and department leaders as well as our curriculum team to identify key components of the curriculum that we will be exposing our students to for the next 6 weeks. The purpose of these concepts are that by exposing our students to them, we will create a foundation in which we can build off of for the 2020-2021 school year. We recognize that some students will thrive in this setting of being at home and using technology resources or paper resources, and we also realize that there are students that will struggle in this mode. Knowing that, we are looking for balance and equity. We understand that as families, there's a lot going on in the household. We also recognize as it becomes nice outside, students will have a more difficult time to continue to be engaged. And all of these things were taken into consideration as we identified those key component areas. There were 4 curricular components, 3 to 4 curricular components identified for each of the areas in each of the grade levels. This is an organized approach, and we are being very specific and being strategic about the strategies that were selected. We realize that there are some things that are easier to be delivered by instruction through an online mode and some topics that are not. All of those things were part of the consideration. Our special ed team continues to work with our general education teachers to make sure that our students that have special needs that are identified in IEPs and 504s are continued to be met. Getting creative and addressing those needs are important, as well as continuing to move forward with IEP meetings and other communications with our families. As we focus in on the elementary, just to kind of give you an update, on Sunday night, last Sunday night, we did send out teaching and learning talking points to our parents. So there is detailed information found in that email if you haven't had an opportunity to look at it. But kind of an overview of elementary is we will be focusing on reading, writing, and math. And again, 3 to 4 concepts or curricular key components for each one of those areas. Online instruction will be delivered by classroom teachers for a maximum of 2 times a week for a student for a total of 60 minutes. The teacher will, depending upon the grade level and the teacher being the expert who knows their students and their needs of their students, will make a decision as to whether or not both of those sessions should be spent on math or both should be spent on reading, or perhaps a mixture within the 30 minutes. Our enrichment or elective areas will continue to offer engagement activities for kids that will be optional, that families can look through the Padlet. We will continue to update that and identify areas that a student is interested in and would like to participate in to keep them busy and constantly engaged as well. We will continue to monitor student engagement. Both principals and teachers, along with counselors and social workers, want to check in on our students and make sure that everyone is doing well. Again, recognizing that this is a difficult time for everybody and finding that balance for our families. If you are not aware, again, I would encourage you to go back and look at the talking points that were sent Sunday night, but we do have printed packets for families that perhaps devices are being utilized in other capacities in the household, or perhaps a student just does better with a paper product. Those packets are available at our school, at our schools, and we have been able to develop a system in which they can be available outside the building. They'll be in rubber tubs with instructions on top in the mornings of the weekdays so that students can walk up and pick them up if they choose to do so. Our middle school will also focus on the core areas and world language. Again, with the help of the teachers, we identified 3 to 4 curriculum components. That will be the focus. Teachers will deliver online instruction. For the grade level 7th and 8th, it will range from a 40 to 50 minute lesson. Some will be pre-recorded, some will be face-to-face, depending upon the content that is being taught. The teachers will also have weekly office hours where they can engage with students, reach out, and allow follow-up with a student that perhaps has a question or that they want to check on to make sure, check for understanding. This will also be available. The middle school will also continue to offer optional enrichment activities for their electives and exploratory courses. We recognize that the 5th Pent of those electives was not started, and that will not obviously be able to happen at this point. But we did continue to post all of those enrichment activities on the Padlet. So if a student is interested in a particular thing that perhaps they didn't get to experience that was left in that fifth pent, they're welcome to look at those as well and participate in those activities. Just like the elementary, we will continue to monitor student engagement. We see this as an expectation of success. We want students to be engaged. This will lay a great foundation for them next year as they begin their new grade level. High school teaching and learning is a focus also on the core areas in world language as well as some electives. We will be offering online instruction. Both high schools have communicated out through their teachers to their students of when those times will be available. The lessons will run anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes, depending upon the area and the grade level. And those teachers will also be maintaining 30 to 60 minutes weekly of office hours to engage students in one-to-one follow-up and also to answer questions. The elective classes, several of them are finishing work through simplified assignments or projects. As students, some elective courses allow for an online module, others it's more difficult. But those teachers continue to push out enrichment activities and expectations of their students as well. I just want to note that as I previously mentioned on the earlier Facebook Live, our students that are enrolled in our advanced placement classes and dual enrollment will continue to follow the expectations of the College Board and the post-secondary institutions in which they're associated with. We felt it was very important that those students still have the opportunity to participate in those courses and earn that college credit if they choose to do so. The Advanced Placement College Board is working on students having the availability of taking those exams online at home, and as more information is collected, they will continue to push out information through the teacher. Again, we will monitor student engagement. We are doing that in order to set kids up for success. That is the expectation, and the high schools also are printing packets and have communicated with families on the availability of those as well. The last piece I'm going to touch on is grading. Before I go into detail, I just want to tell you that we realize that grading is a little bit messy here. There are pieces of it that we are still working through as far as the logistics of it. But the goal is really to keep students engaged the next 6 weeks. This is new times for us as students as well as educators, and we realize that grading is challenging. The elementary and the middle school grades will end with their third quarter grade. Teachers will continue to provide feedback on assignments and encourage students in order to get that exposure piece built to those key components. We do recognize and realize, as Dr. Rickley stated, that the fall will also have to look different as we will build opportunities for the curriculum to spiral down and review and pick up items that were missed in the fourth quarter for all students. High school obviously has to look a little bit different because these courses are all credit bearing, moving towards graduation. Seniors, as you know, they continued on their path. Grading is currently going on with feedback from teachers. Starting Monday on the 13th, grades 9 through 11 will also, as I mentioned earlier, move towards exposure to new content and teaching. Assignments will be assigned and grades will be given to those assignments. However, we recognize that there are a lot of considerations here, both on the end of our instructors, our teachers, as well as our students. There are students that have problems with accessing internet. We realize that there are students that are engaged in helping in the household, perhaps caring for younger children, and there's a lot of issues, and we recognize that. So all of those things will be taken into consideration as we calculate final grades. We will take a no-harm approach. And what I mean by a no-harm approach is when grades are finalized and calculated, basically we will scrutinize and look at each individual student and make sure that no student is penalized for the time that we are in right now, or for the fact that we could not continue their education journey as we had hoped to when we started this school year. The logistics of that are still being worked out, and we're working through pieces of that and communicating with our educators. Again, we feel it's really imperative that our students stay engaged. And as parents, we need you to help us with this in the partnership of getting them exposed to this new content. The last thing I just want to mention is the third quarter ended right before spring break. It was the Thursday before spring break. We recognized that there were students that were out absent at the time, or perhaps had made arrangements for the Friday that we called off school to move to the quarantine. We wanted to grant students an opportunity to turn in any missing work from that quarter. Also, if they were planning on a retake or they wanted to complete a different assignment and had that conversation with the teachers, we wanted to make sure that we allowed for that. So currently, the third quarter window is open through April 17th to allow students to go back and make adjustments and turn in any of those missing assignments that they were hoping to do so. The last piece here is really kind of summarizes our communication efforts in our district. We recognize that as family members, there's a lot of communication that is coming at you, especially if you have students in multiple grade levels, such as high school, middle school, and elementary. And you could also be receiving communication from multiple teachers if you have a secondary student. So therefore, we wanted to try to build a smooth transition for you as a family, and also give you a timeline of when you could expect communication. And so this slide, you will see the work of Annette Iman, our communication director, and her team, basically as a general overview across the district. On Fridays, you can expect teacher communication for the week at a glance of the next week. We were strategic in placing this on Fridays so that families could have the weekend to build a schedule, work around device usage and other circumstances in the household so that they would know what to expect for the upcoming week. The last 3 Sundays, the district has sent out district communication. This will continue as we move forward and as we continue to make decisions that impact the entire district. Monday is really for school communication. Building principals and leaders will be sending out information. Middle schools, that will include assignments that will be assigned for the week, and high school teachers will begin to communicate with their students. The rest of the week is pretty much designated for teacher times as they reach out to both students and parents for additional communication. We've asked our teachers to respond to their emails within a 24-hour window. Again, we recognize that our teachers are also home with their families and they are trying to create a balance as well. So we wanted to create the expectation so that you would know as families when you could expect to hear back from them. We are saying that Fridays after 3 o'clock and not Mondays before 3 o'clock in order to give our teachers the time that they need to re-energize and plan on the weekend for the upcoming week. That kind of captures our communication schedule for the district. Dr. Rickley?
Thank you very much, Ms. Siri. And I've been closely watching the questions as they roll in. We have over 900 people currently watching, and that's just an incredible showing of community support. So for those of you that are watching, thank you, truly. Your support means a whole lot to us. So we have approximately 30 minutes left, and we're going to ask Ms. Iman, our Director of Communication, to throw out questions. And if it's a teaching and learning focused question, I will very likely defer to Shireen. And if it's a general district operational question, I'll do my best to answer it myself, and we'll just go through as many questions as we can. And any questions that we don't get to, we will record and do our best to get those posted after the broadcast is over. Ms. Iman, could you start us off?
Well, let's start with a kind of easy one here, Dr. Rickley, for you. There were lots of questions about picking up items at the schools, and is there going to be another day to go clean out lockers and do all of those types of things?
So the question, is that getting picked up okay? Do I need to restate the question? Just restate the question. Okay. So no. Okay. Very good. So the question was, do we have an opportunity to get back into our buildings? And the answer is we are trying to avoid it if at all possible. And here's our rationale. When the governor released his directed health measure saying buildings are closed through the end of May, he was doing that for public safety reasons. He doesn't want staff being exposed to potential pathogens that the public is bringing in, and vice versa. We're really trying to keep true to the groups no larger than 10. I know that puts parents and staff and students in a difficult place. You may have things at home that you want to return, and likewise, you may have things at your locker that you weren't able to pick up at the first round of the school opening, which we did a couple of weeks ago. But to the extent possible, we really want to keep our campuses closed to protect our staff safety, and just as importantly, to make sure that you and your child's safety is being safeguarded as well. Thank you for the question.
Yep, and if I can just add to that, when it does become safe, we do have principals already with plans as to how that will happen, but we just really want to do our part right now to make sure that we're helping to flatten that curve. We hear how important these next couple of weeks are going to be in Nebraska.
Dr. Settles, there were a couple questions about calendar, which I know falls under you. Is the calendar being changed? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the calendar, particularly days like Monday that were non-teaching days, and what does that look like now?
Yep, absolutely. So first of all, tomorrow does remain a day off, April 10th. So your weekend starts now, which is exciting. Monday was originally scheduled to be a staff development day. That's April 13th. But as you've seen on our phase 2 of the learning plan, that is now a learning day. So do plan to be engaged on Monday. As far as where will we end the school year? We're still continuing right now with May 22nd for our end of the school year, but as Dr. Siri said, we do have, we'll continue to monitor this. We're continuing to make adjustments as things are needed. So we did tell our teachers that we would try to make some time at the end of the school year for some of the fun types of things that they usually get to do with their students to close down the year as well. So we'll be continuing to monitor that.
There were lots of questions about summer school. What is the plan for summer school? Are we going to be able to have that? Is there an alternate plan in place?
So we've had lots of conversations centered around summer school and Jumpstart. We are currently working through Plan B. Plan A was to do it later in the summer, such as early July. It is looking like that is likely not to happen. However, if we are allowed to do it, we will do it at a later time. But we are developing another plan in case June and July does not work. For an opportunity to engage with those kids. More information to come. The high school will look a little bit different. Those students that are participating in credit recovery through our online module, that will continue, and they will be allowed to finish out those courses as they are working on that credit recovery piece.
There were several questions about the Zoom technology and using Zoom for meetings, and is it really secure, and is there a meeting process in place?
Yeah, could I change gears a little bit here and refer that question to Mr. Lucas Bingham, who's our Director of Technology. Lucas, would you
Absolutely.
mind?
Well, thank you for the question. We certainly recognize the concerns that are out there regarding Zoom. There's been a lot in the media lately, a lot of stories about its usability and how it's been used in other areas. We have chosen Zoom as one of the platforms that we'll have our faculty using for connecting with students as they deem necessary. And our instructional technology support team has done an incredible job working with our teachers. One of the things is we were having our teachers utilize Zoom as a participant first so they could get comfortable with it, see how it works. And that team of instructional technology support folks really put together a lot of great materials for our staff to follow, including things like classroom norms to run an online meeting, the security settings that we're recommending that they follow when they do hold meetings in a virtual environment. And in addition to that, Zoom's done a lot in the last weeks and several days, even recently, to change some of those settings to help beef up the security to make sure that meetings are safe and secure for our students. So there's a lot of global settings that we've set as well. We've got the ability to set settings just across all of our accounts. One of the things, just for examples, we've disabled screen sharing automatically, so the teacher now has to enable it, which is one of the things that you've probably heard about in the news. So we've obviously been following this very closely. We take it very seriously, but we feel like we're staying on top of those things to make sure that it's a tool that's safe for our students to use with their teachers and their interactions. So we appreciate those concerns, and we're definitely staying on top of it, and we feel like we've done some great things to put measures in place to keep it safe.
Dr. Suri, I think this is one for you. There's still lots of questions about grading, and a common theme is what exactly does no harm mean? What does that mean to the students and to the parents?
Okay, thanks. Great question. So like I said, we realize that grading is a challenge. At the high school level, the expectation is that students will continue to be engaged. We want them to be successful at that next transition step at the beginning of next school year. And so the key components that we narrowed down to, we wanted kids exposed to, we feel will set them up for that success. So it's important that they stay engaged, and teachers are working hard to make sure that the assignments that they give them and the instruction and the activities help with that engagement piece, and I'm so appreciative to all their work. As far as the no harm, what that means is it is not fair for the events that have happened that a student would be penalized for the events that have happened, nor is it reasonable to assume that all students have equal access to internet, to devices, to time. We also recognize that moving forward, there's a lot of things that we don't know as we're transitioning through this plan. For example, we hope that our teachers don't get sick, but we recognize that there could be family members or the instructors themselves. And so we wanted to make sure that a student was not penalized and that their grade or their GPA could not be harmed. What we're working on right now is what does that look like? Like logistically, those are the pieces that I don't have clear answers for you at this time. We are trying to see what the back end of that looks like. But basically, students have the opportunity here to improve their grade, the formative assessment that is going on, teachers to provide feedback. And when we get to the summative piece, we'll ensure that no kid is penalized because they could not be in school at this time and that it was a remote learning plan.
Thank you. Dr. Rickley, there's some questions still about graduation, like what exactly is a virtual graduation? What will that look like?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, and I did want to clarify the question also about will kids have an opportunity to drop off or pick up items. The one thing that's important for our seniors to remember is caps and gowns and diplomas, both the actual diploma itself as well as the cover. We will figure out a way to get those to students prior to both the virtual event and hopefully the face-to-face event, if we can pull that off in July or August. So I don't want to go into too many of the specifics yet in terms of what that graduation will look like. Mr. Kalina and Mr. Johnson are still working really hard to finalize, but let me just give you an idea of what that virtual ceremony might look like. We might be able to showcase some of our students' singing ability with the national anthem as we would in a traditional event. We would hopefully be able to showcase some of our students' academic accomplishments by having student speakers as we would at a traditional event, for example. At both high schools, we very often have some type of a choral arrangement where our underclassmen, or even in some cases our upperclassmen, have some musical numbers to add some musical element to the ceremony. That would be something we would look at. Traditionally, you've all been forced to suffer through 10 minutes of your superintendent blathering with the superintendent comments. As I asked Mr. Kalina and Mr. Johnson, I said, given the circumstances, maybe maybe you'd prefer that I not address the senior group. And they said, this is a time where they need to hear from our superintendent. So I think having some type of remarks from myself and from your principals would be very much expected. But I think the centerpiece of it all is really about the students. So one of the things we're working with our communications office in both high schools is making sure that we have current pictures of all graduates, and so that mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, whomever's at home watching can see their son or daughter go across the stage virtually with a picture, their name, and if there's any type of academic distinction, we've talked about adding that to the ceremony, if they're magna cum laude, for example, if they're summa cum laude, for example. So we're still ironing out the details, but as much as possible, we want this to be meaningful, classy, and an event that you and your family can be very proud of.
Dr. Settles, maybe I'll throw this one to you. There's still lots of questions from parents about how do I manage this if I still have to go to work, report to work, working for home, and my kid has to be on a Zoom lesson. How do I juggle all of it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I mean, it's obviously one that we've all been struggling with ourselves personally, and we know that many of our families still have. We know that if you are working out of the home, obviously you are in an essential position, and you need to revert back to what we keep saying tonight, and that is make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your family needs first. What I know about our teachers is they are flexible and they are patient people, and they also want the best for you and your family and your student. One of the things with the recordings, the Zoom recordings, is that they will be recorded and available. There's most definitely, if it hasn't already happened in your family, that there's been a conflict with one of the lessons, it's bound to happen at some point. So whether that is that your student is watching it later on, or that they are perhaps utilizing a packet to help catch up on whatever the assignment was for the day, know that we are exercising patience and want to make sure that we're working alongside with you, and we're just going to be very flexible in doing so. Anything to add to that?
One thing that I might add, I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, we may look at future Facebook Live events, and judging by the turnout of parents and community members, I think we will very likely continue to have these conversations. One of the next conversations that we would like to have with you at some point, sooner rather than later, is hearing from our school social workers about mental health. How can we make sure that we're looking out for our staff's mental health needs, our students, our families, and more to the point, putting families in touch with the right resources. The school district can offer a variety of services and supports even when our doors are closed. But there's also many, many resources out in the community that our counselors, our psychologists, and our school social workers are very well equipped to handle. So that would be something that we would love to discuss with you at a future Facebook Live event. Thank you for the question.
Dr. Siri, there's lots of questions about middle school. Primarily, if my middle schooler is taking Spanish 1, is it the same curriculum that Spanish 1 at the high school, and will that continue to be? And same way with those advanced math classes. And also lots of questions about grading specifically at the middle school.
Okay, thanks. Good question. So currently, if a student is enrolled in Spanish 1 as an 8th grader, it is the same curriculum that is delivered at the high school, and they will continue to move forward with that. The priorities that were identified in Spanish 1 was in association with the high school Spanish 1, so that they are focusing on the same thing. As well as the advanced math components. Currently, no high school credit is given at the middle level. That really has to do with the fact that the purpose of allowing students to earn those credits at the middle level early is to allow them to go further in their academic career, either in Spanish or in math. But obviously, we even know that students in Spanish 1 at the high school level, whether it be high school or middle school. Spanish 2, we are starting to work on what key components will have to be reviewed and spiraled down to pick up those things that were in the 4th quarter of Spanish 1. As far as grading at the middle school, the grading period will end with third quarter outside of the opportunity for students to turn in missing work and raise their grade for third quarter, but no new grading will be done for fourth quarter. Teachers will continue to provide feedback, again, because we want to keep students engaged, and we're starting to build that foundation of exposure for the upcoming school year, but no new grades will be assigned.
Kind of along those same lines, there's lots of comments about grades that were supposed to be entered prior to the break and they haven't been entered yet. Can you talk a little bit about that and the timeline for that, and how kids can get about missing work if they were absent the week before we had the break?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Our teachers are busy grading, and for those of you that are educators can appreciate this. It seems like there's never enough time to balance that, to get all that done. But it is one of the reasons why we made the window for makeup work and redos. We extended it to April 17th because we realized that our teachers are just finishing up. There are still some things that they're grading, trying to get entered. And a student may not know if they want to redo something or if they're missing an assignment. So we were very strategic in making sure that we had solid couple weeks there to allow them to do that. As far as if you have a question about a specific assignment, or if you're curious about something that maybe doesn't appear in the gradebook, I would encourage you to reach out to that teacher and ask that question. Simply sending an email would be a good way to start, and if it's a high school student, that would be a good place to have them reach out to that teacher and ask the question specifically.
Dr. Rickley, there's been several questions about fields being closed and what is the harm of kids throwing balls around on fields or kicking balls around on fields. Can you address some of that and what we've learned from the health department?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. This was a really difficult decision for us. One of the very first things that we did was we reached out to Sarpy County Health Department. They are terrific partners with us, by the way. I hope you know that as taxpayers and citizens. And their advice to us was, given the circumstances, that at the end of the day, it's the school district's decision, but they thought that there would be clear health benefits to us closing down our fields, our playgrounds, and our athletic facilities. It's my understanding that the decision is consistent with what we're seeing in the city as well. The city of Papillion, I believe, has also taken a similar approach. We're trying to find a balance in all things, and my family lives just up the road from Bell Elementary, and I can tell you that my own children, prior to us locking down the playgrounds, spent time there. It was a great way to get some fresh air and burn off some calories and stretch their legs a little bit. So I can promise you that wasn't a decision that we made lightly, but what we counterbalanced it with was the reality that we saw so many instances across the district where kids were not observing social distancing, where it wasn't a group of 5 to 7 kids throwing a ball around, for example. It was groups of 20, 30 or more, and I don't blame them. If I'm a 10-year-old, 15-year-old kid, I would want to do the same thing. But at the end of the day, it's our job to protect their health if they're not making good decisions for themselves. So it wasn't a decision that we were happy about, but it was a decision made in the interest of your families and your student safety.
There's lots of testing questions, so I'm going to lump a couple of these together. ACT tests for juniors, AP tests, are those still going to happen? And what about the HAL testing for next year?
Yeah, great question. So the ACT test that should have happened April 7th has obviously been postponed. That is across our state. The State Department right now, the Nebraska Department of Education, they are having conversations about the possibility of offering that free ACT test to those students as seniors in the fall. I don't have a lot of details on that at this time, and I know logistically they're trying to make that work with ACT, but we are hoping that will be a possibility for them. But otherwise, they will be excused from the state ACT test. As far as AP test, The College Board is responsible for AP testing. That is what allows a student to earn credit for that particular coursework. They are diligently working on ways that students can access those tests at home, remotely with technology, and take that test to still earn college credit. There are some advanced AP courses that probably will not be a possibility just due to their content. But for the most part, I believe our AP courses, it looks like they're working on a means to deliver that test to our students as a possibility. That information comes from the College Board to our teachers, so teachers will continue to communicate that as they receive it. Great question.
There's several questions about school. Do we really think school is going to start in August? Is that the assumption that we're operating under? And then how will that transition happen, particularly for 6th graders to 7th graders, for 8th graders to 9th graders? What activities will we be able to do?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at the first part of the question. So we know that we're closed down for the remainder of this school year, obviously, and I think our governor is taking a very measured approach in terms of projecting out when life can begin returning to normal. The truth of the matter is none of us know. None of us have a crystal ball. But I think there's some promising signs when you look at the national data and the global data in terms of cases that we know of peaking. In fact, interestingly enough, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who advises President Trump on a variety of medical-related issues, came out publicly yesterday and stated that he does believe that schools will be in session this August, this September. He was very quick to point out that there will have to be certain protocols in place, social distancing probably being one of them. How you practically do that in a building with 400, 800, much less 2,000 kids will be a challenge. I don't know how that looks yet, but the fact that one of our president's top advisors saying that he's confident that we can get back to somewhat of a routine schedule next fall gives me hope. I think here in Nebraska, we have been spared the worst of some of the examples that we've seen around the country in terms of new infections and obviously mortality rates that we've seen on the coasts. So with any luck at all, I think we'll find the cases peaking in late April, early May. None of this will come to complete normalcy, in my opinion, until the vaccine is found. But I'm very confident that our school will be able to reopen next August 11th. And obviously we'll have a lot to do between now and then to get ready, but I'm very optimistic, and we're more than ready to have your kids back in the middle of August. Thank you for the question.
And so those particular events that are focused around transition from one level to the next level, for example, the 6th graders that get a middle school orientation, those are all things that we're talking about. Obviously, we're talking about what that looks like in the fall, but we are also building some contingency plans in case, for logistical reasons or advice of the health department, that needs to look different. Those are all pieces that we're focusing on right now, but at this time, we don't have solid answers.
There were a couple questions about students with the IEPs and what kind of supports will they continue to get, and what will this look like?
Dr. Boyson, would you mind taking that question?
Great question. Thank you for that question. So this week we have been working, and last week for that matter, been working with our special education teams. And this includes more than just the special education teachers. It also includes our speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and all of those related services. Our school psychologists meeting with early next week. And as we're continuing to have conversations with them, we're asking them to reach out to every parent of a child on their caseload with an IEP, or for our infants and toddlers with IFSPs. So you will be hearing from a case manager. We were trying to coordinate this week so that if your child has a large team, that you aren't hearing from every single person on that team, plus the grade level teachers, plus the principals, maybe the district. As we're hearing, some of that may be overwhelming. So we are coordinating this week that you would hear from one person on the team, most likely that case manager, and they will explain to you how we're going to move forward, how your student is going to still get some of their needs met through this new learning plan, specifically the needs that focus on the new learning, how they will have accommodations met. They'll have that conversation with you, and you will make a decision together about the best way to get some of those services out to your child, whether it's through paper pencil or having a phone call or even consulting with you and helping you so that you can best help your child at home in this different environment. So if you have not heard, please feel free to email your case manager. I took down some of your names that I saw with questions on the chat. I'll reach out to those case managers and make sure they get to you. It's a good time to make sure that your email address is updated. So if you feel like you might have an old email address in our system, try to email that special education case manager or call up to the school and leave a message, and they'll get back in touch with you to make sure that we have your right email address. I think that we've kind of covered some of the accommodations questions that I saw as well coming up. It'll be a little bit different to do occupational therapy and physical therapy, some of those things that some of our students need in this different environment. So they'll most likely be consulting with you and telling you some of the things that they were working on in the school, so they could work with your student and say, does this sound familiar? Sounds like you were doing some of these things. And there's always that back and forth communication to make sure you get your needs met.
Thank you, Dr. Voisin. My watch is showing about 3 minutes of, and as we said at the beginning, we'd like to end on time. I think we have time for one or two more questions, and then we need to start doing wrap-up, keeping in mind we will keep track of the questions we didn't get to and hopefully get some of those questions answered as well. Back to you, Ms. Iman.
The question is about food, and will the food program continue throughout the summer, even after the last day of school? What's the plans for that, as well as just other needs for families if they don't have internets or don't have access to internet or devices? What do they do?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So food first. So we will continue to provide meals to our families once a week, every Monday, starting at 7:30, as long as our supplies continue to hold, as long as we continue to have staff to carry that function out, and as long as we don't go down the road that we've seen some other states in terms of the shelter in place, which may limit our ability to do so. We know that there are many families in this school district and community that are quickly counting on those meals. So our goal is to continue that into summer if those factors are in place. I'll have Ms. Siri answer the second part of the question regarding technology, pickup of devices, and internet. But please know that our technology team is working really, really hard to make sure that all of our students, most notably our seniors, but all of our students have access to a device if they need it. And we've been able to partner with some outside agencies on some potential solutions on providing internet if the home doesn't have internet service at home. Am I missing anything, Ms. Siri?
No. The technology team's been working diligently to get devices ready, and we have handed out close to 300 devices at this time for students that are in need. We do have very specific criteria for those individuals that are asking for a device. Unfortunately, we don't have a fleet that could cover everyone, so we're trying to do our best to make sure that we're getting it to those folks that do not have any device in the household. However, if you are having problems with that, or you meet that criteria where you don't have a device outside of phones, we're not counting phones in that, reach to your building principal. They know what to do, and we're processing that through our student services, and they're partnering with technology to contact those families once we've taken that information. I would also like to share that we recognize that some families don't have access to internet. We're trying to work through that as well. We have a lot of great partnerships with a lot of companies that are also willing to help, and we're trying to work through that. But what we have also found is those companies are also overwhelmed and several weeks behind trying to get their service out to individuals as well. But we're trying to make the best of the situation, which is also why we are continuing to put out the paper packets for the teaching and learning materials. But again, if you find yourself in that situation, reach out to your building principal, and they will collect some information from you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the 7 o'clock hour, and I would like to talk a little bit about next steps. First of all, we mentioned earlier in the broadcast that we would like to continue our Facebook Lives. There is a certain amount of logistic and planning that goes into each one of these, as you might imagine, so we probably won't be able to fall into a weekly type of a routine, but every 2 to 3 weeks, certainly, as long as the demand is there. And I mentioned earlier, mental health and resources for families would be a future topic that we would be very willing to explore. One of the slides, in fact, I believe the last slide, gives a list of resources. Whether you are a staff person, we have resources to support you. If you are a family, we have resources to support you. And we have a few links and hotline numbers for you to access if you have some unmet needs. And if in doubt, email us or call us. Our central office is still open, and there are people here that are willing and able to help. I would also like to tell you that this community is a really, really special place. And I think this broadcast is just one more example. We have people that care, we have people that are supportive, and we have people that are willing to step up and do some pretty wonderful things to support our kids and our families. So thank you for everything that you do to support the district. Please be patient with us. I know I sound a little bit like a broken record, but we're figuring this out every single day ourselves. I can tell you very confidently in the 3 weeks since we've come back from spring break, some things have gone really, really well, and some things haven't gone to plan. But the one thing that I'm really proud of about this district is people learn really fast, and we make it better. And it'll never be perfect, and we will never be able to meet everyone's needs 100%, but we're gonna try really hard to do just that. So thank you for giving us grace, and more importantly, give a little bit of grace to yourself. This is an incredibly trying, stressful time for our staff, for our kids, and for you. And just be willing to take care of one another and be gentle to one another. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for everything you do to make this such a special place and a special community. Our best days are still ahead. Thank you very much, and have a lovely holiday weekend.